So welcome everybody. We might have some more people who will join, but after our first session about Project Fugu, welcome Michael Solati, who is a developer relations engineer at Google, focusing on the web and Chrome. He has been writing code for 5 years and has found his love in Angular, Firebase, progressive web apps, and the voodoo ways of the web. Michael has also spoken at various meetups and conferences, including Angular New York City, JSConf China, and the United Nations. Michael has a side business, MAS product. Feel free to ask him about it. And he's gonna speak about Lighthouse to us, which is one of the cornerstones of keeping an eye on the performance of your web apps and the way to enhance and make them better. And it's always a major topic during Chrome Dev Summits. And he's gonna tell more about it for us.
Okay, give me a second. So I'm assuming it's safe to present, right, Chaba?
That's correct.
Okay. I believe everyone should see my screen. If someone can just throw a thumbs up, because I see one person with the camera on. That's good. Thank you. All right. All right, so as mentioned before, my name is Michael Solati. I am primarily a web developer who lives in the Bay Area. Typically, a lot of my code samples are like Angular based. So actually, we're going to be looking at some code later on today, which is based on a Angular project. But I will say, ignore the fact that it seems to be like Angular specific, only because it's not, and we're going to be covering some like framework agnostic tools and concepts. So whatever we discuss today and actually code today, you guys should be able to implement into your own code, into your own projects with little to no headache. Also mentioned, I am a developer relations engineer at Google. I predominantly work on 2 websites. I am willing to bet that you guys have seen one of them at some point. And if not, I recommend you checking them out. One of the sites I work on is web.dev, which happens to be the Google Chrome web team's kind of one-stop shop for anything and everything web related. So if you're interested in understanding how Web Vitals affect your rating in like Google search, if you're interested in tips and tricks on performance, image compression, and just like tons and tons of different stuff that might be relevant to your web applications, that's a great resource. And the other one is the Chrome developer website. So developer.chrome.com. A new version of it actually got released, I think it was just about a month ago. It was a few days before the Chrome Dev Summit. So that's a new site that we also recreated from scratch. So I invite you guys to check them out because it provides some awesome, powerful documentation, knowledge, etc., etc. I love the web. I grew up on the web. I grew up in the 90s, the 2000s, and even now. And I think the web is an incredible platform to build these compelling experiences. And we have tools to build these compelling experiences. And one of those tools we're going to discuss is Lighthouse Ci. I started working on the web with a framework called Meteor, switched to Angular, but now I do a lot of different things. And the most important thing for any and all of this, I will say, is I have made a lot of mistakes. And I say that because I am hoping, one, chances are I'm going to make some mistakes today in the coding part of this presentation. And 2, hopefully you will learn from mistakes I make potentially in real time. That way you guys don't have to make those same mistakes. So as users of the web, we should know that performance matters. no one likes to wait for a website. And even if we have the patience or like we don't necessarily mind waiting, we don't always have a lot of time. And so when we need to look up something, we may be in a rush. For every second delayed in a mobile page load, conversions can fall up to 20%. And as developers, we've probably heard a statistic something like this about how slower sites have these higher drop-off rates. And that's like 100% true. We've experienced it going to a site that if it takes a while to load, or if it's just janky while using the site, we end up not using it after that. So speed ends up being a really important factor for how our websites show up in a Google search. It impacts discoverability, and this is all based on the performance of our websites. This was rolled out in this factor for the Google search was rolled out in July of 2018. It's called the speed update. So relevant thing that to know is that speed is used as a ranking factor for your searches. So I happened to find this quote by Carolina Caesar as like a really important insight. I would say that tooling seems to be a barrier to improving the quality and performance of our websites. And it doesn't end up being one of the main focuses that we have during development of our web applications. But as developers, there are tons of tools that we have to evaluate the performance of our web applications and websites. And a key tool that Google provides is called Lighthouse. So Lighthouse is an open source tool for auditing sites to help developers by providing opportunities and diagnostics to improve the user experience of your sites. You can run it against any web page, whether it's public or it requires authentication. It has audits for performance, accessibility, SEO, PWA rankings, and more. And finally, you can use Lighthouse pretty much anywhere. Lighthouse is actually built into the Chrome DevTools, so you can use it straight from there. If DevTools don't work, you can actually run a Lighthouse as an extension that's available in both Chrome and Firefox. And you can also just like install Lighthouse from NPM. Like you can use it in your like as a CLI tool in your like terminal or whatever from a global install, or you can just like include it in your code. So if you're writing some node scripts to run some automated tests, you can just include Lighthouse right there. So Lighthouse ends up being a fantastic tool. And I mentioned that it can provide some valuable insights. So I'm going to actually pop open to a web app I have here. It's a simple web app that just shows some information about movies. And I'm going to right click, inspect to open up my Chrome DevTools here. And if I go into this double carrots thing, go to Lighthouse, here's where we can start to run Lighthouse. So I'm going to click Generate Report, and I'm going to let Lighthouse run a suite of tests against this website right now. Okay, so right off the top here, it gives us some rankings for a few different things. There's performance, accessibility, best practices, SEO, and PWA. We can take a look at the performance first, and it has some key metrics that it's giving us an analysis over. There's the first contentful paint, which was generated in about 1 second, speed index, largest contentful paint, just a slew of different things. And so if I expand here, I can actually get a little bit of a description as to each one of these things. So the speed index is one of the areas where we fell a little short, with it taking roughly 4 seconds. So it gives a description as to what it's actually checking here. So speed index shows how quickly the contents of a page are visibly populated. And I mentioned, like, yes, this is somewhat meaningful or helpful insight, but there's this little learn more section that if I give it a click, it'll actually pop open an article on web dev that gives you additional information on how things matter. So here, this actually gives you a breakdown as to how things are scored, the speed index based on time. additional things about how to improve your speed index score. So not only is it giving a rating as to how your application is performing right inside of Lighthouse, it's actually giving you advice or tips as to how to improve things. So I guess the largest contentful paint is where we are hitting the hardest roadblock. And checking this out, again, gives the time estimates for how your score is impacted by how quickly it loads in, how to improve your LCP score. So again, it's providing a lot of useful information for what it's measuring and where I can improve on these things. And if I scroll down, it lists more opportunities like properly resizing the images, removing unused JavaScript, it's saying which file, the potential savings, etc., etc. Genuinely a lot of useful information. And then there's the things that you do well on, and it gives you a description as to what that is. So this website uses HTTPS. Powerful tool, really useful. I'd recommend you guys getting at least a little familiar with it if you haven't used it before. So as I mentioned, Lighthouse is a fantastic tool, great for auditing sites and doing spot checks on our websites. But ideally, we'd want to build this into our everyday development experience. And that's where a tool like Lighthouse Ci comes in. Lighthouse Ci is a suite of tools for using Lighthouse during your continuous integration process. By asserting Lighthouse, you can continuously, you can actually catch regressions in the performance of your websites before they become too unruly. And you can use common CI tools like GitHub Actions, Travis CI, and let Lighthouse automate the testing of your site on every commit you actually push. So the Lighthouse CI project on GitHub is, if you visit this URL, you can check it out here. And I'm actually going to pop it open. So I'll leave this open for a sec, just so you guys can see it. It's bit.ly/Lighthouse Ci. The L, the C, and the I are all uppercase. So I'm going to actually just jump into the project now. So here it is on GitHub. And we're actually going to use this in a second to take a web application and apply Lighthouse CI to it. So we're actually going to be taking the same project that here, this pwa.auto.dev. And I actually cloned it or forked it and just did some stuff here. So if you guys want to take a look at this in a little bit, no rush. I'm going to drop the URL in the chat as well, just so you guys can see the changes that I'm going to make here. Where's the chat? Okay. So what we're going to do is let's get this project up and running locally. Okay. So I'm going to just run npm run start. This application is going to build. Just so you guys see, no magic here. This is all running on my localhost 4200. So this is the same web application that I showed you before. And we're just going to go through the steps to add Lighthouse CI in here to see how this actually impacts our development process. So the first thing we are going to need to do is get Lighthouse CI set up. And that first step is actually going to be to install Lighthouse CI on GitHub. So I don't necessarily want to reinstall it. So I just have a video here that I'm going to play for you guys that shows you like the process to go to install Lighthouse CI to your GitHub account. So I'll just click play. So from that Lighthouse CI project that I shared earlier, we can scroll down to the quick start and click on the getting started guide. From here, we'll use the GitHub app method. There's a link that says install. And so it'll take you to the GitHub app. You can click configure or install if it's your first time. Choose the account that you want to give permission to. Click accept, and then it'll take you to this page where right here it's blurred out, but it would provide you a token code. Copy, save that code because we will need it for later. Okay, so let's get started here. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to, give me 1 second. Okay, so we are going to go to the getting started guide. And we are going to scroll to the configure Lighthouse CI. So what it's saying here is, in order to get started with Lighthouse Ci, we're going to have to create a file called Lighthouse Rc.js. So I'm just going to copy that name, and I'm going to create that in the root of the project. So new file, paste the name. So here's our Lighthouse Rc file. And we are just going to copy this as well. So this, as it describes, is a simple configuration that says whatever is going to be tested is going to be stored in a temporary public storage. That shouldn't mean anything yet. It'll mean something in a little bit. Where is code? So let's make this a little bit bigger. And we will just paste that code in here. Now, while that addresses most of what we need to do with the Lighthouse Ci, there's one additional step for this Lighthouse RC file. So this tells us this is going to tell the Lighthouse Ci to upload the results of running the tests to the temporary storage bucket. But what we need to do, or what we need to add to this, is actually give it some information on how to test the website. So here we're going to create a collect object. First thing we're going to do is create this URL array. And again, just because this is a really simple tool to use, all I'm going to do here is give the Lighthouse Ci what URL to test. So it's going to be testing on localhost 4000, because when I run my app locally, it runs on localhost 4000. And then finally, we're going to give it the start server command, which is the command that Lighthouse Ci is going to use in order to start up the server that it is going to test against. So npm run start server-side rendering. And that's it. That's the only modification I really needed to make from the directions, is just to tell Lighthouse Ci what URL it's going to test and how to start the server. This itself should actually be enough to run Lighthouse Ci. Open up my tools. I can do build the site, which I'm gonna. So give me a second to build. Almost done there. Okay. So now I've just built my web application. Because I have the Lighthouse RC file configured, it says, hey, this is the URL we're going to test against. Here's the start command for the server. So in my terminal, if you've installed Lighthouse locally, or Lighthouse Ci locally, all you have to do is lhci auto run. And then it starts up the Lighthouse Ci test. So you can see a few green check marks. Started a web server with the npm run serve ssr, which was this command here. And now it's running Lighthouse 3 times against this URL, which is the URL I provided here. So I'll let these tests run. I'm going to let these tests run while I just continue through the steps for setting it up to run on GitHub Actions. So that was for the Lighthouse RC.js file. The next thing we're going to do is set up the GitHub Actions. So they actually provide a workflow to set up the GitHub action. I'm just going to copy the file name, and we will create a new file. And then we will just copy this entire workflow, paste it into here. And the only change I need to make is npm run build SSR. So that's just going to be our build command. It looks like the tests failed locally, but that also could be because of my environment. So we're not going to worry about that too much. But let's just set up the CI thing here. And so we're going to just commit these changes and push them. So the only relevant changes, only relevant changes that we're going to have is the Lighthouse Ci JS, which defines, which some of this was copy and paste from the docs, but the only thing I added here is this is the URL to test. This is the server start command. And then the other file that we copied was this workflow, which said, actually, is this the right workflow? I might be mistaken. Yeah, this is the correct workflow. Just copied over this workflow as well. And the only change we made is our build command because we use a slightly different build step than the one that they use. So I'm going to just add these, add CI, commit it, push it. And so ideally, we'll give this page a refresh. Give our second commit. And if I click into the commits, I can see that there's a little yellow circle. Click on it, and I can see that a test is, or an action is running, which is the CI action. We'll click details, and we can look through the process to see how it's going to work. And I will admit this seems to be working a little more smoothly than I expected, so I imagine I've screwed something up, and we will see soon enough if I did. Just because this is going to take a couple of minutes, or maybe a minute or two, does anyone have any questions they want to pitch my way, just so we can kill the time, so to speak?
So this is running headless Chrome right now?
Yes, Lighthouse Ci runs on headless Chrome, and I believe it runs on headless Chrome, which I think is through Puppeteer. I may be mistaken with that, but I believe that is correct. Though I don't know too well on how this tool inside work. I say that because Google actually has a API endpoint that can run Lighthouse. So using the API endpoint, we could post a URL to it and it will run the tests and provide the results. But under the hood, that also uses headless Chrome. So no matter what is actually doing the testing is running headless Chrome. I just don't know off the top of my head if it's being run locally or through the API. Hopefully that was a helpful answer.
Yes. Do you know exactly what speed profiles and phone hardware profile does it use?
Another good question. Off the top of my head, I don't know. I believe it just does use the default settings that you would find in Chrome, which I think does like fast 3. I can check. I think it's like fast 3G speeds as well as like a test on a Moto 4.
Yeah, it's Moto G4 or something like that.
Yeah,
like, it's not too fast, not as fast as what we have for cable connection.
sure. And I think that's the part of the intention for running Lighthouse, to see how it works on devices that like aren't the highest and greatest devices. So just because the tests finish up running here, I'm gonna click on the Run Lighthouse CI, you can see that all the tests have run. And so it's generated a report. So open the report, click on that. And so now I actually can view the report here, where it gives me all the same information, first contentful paint, et cetera, but this is all stored on a bucket that Google has available. Now, the one thing that was missing here, so we can see that the test ran here, is we can actually have the commit show the score or the result of the test. So I'm going to quickly fix this project to do that and push it up. And then from there, I think we'll be in a good place. So I'll just need maybe a minute or two. And I actually copied the URL so we can look at this real quick. Or copy the content so we can look at it and see the difference between what was provided. So this is going to run on push. The additional thing, I'm actually gonna copy this entire thing because I think this will be a better thing, a better GitHub action. And so the only really additional step that this GitHub action adds to the process that's relevant is it has an environment variable of a Lighthouse Ci GitHub app token. So that token is what we saw at the end of the video that I showed earlier. And what that token will allow is next time I make a push up, if I have the token set, it'll actually update the commit message with the scores from Lighthouse Ci. So in order to do that, I'm going to go into the Lighthouse Ci project settings. I'm going to go into secrets. I'm going to create a new secret. I'm going to copy that name. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this out of the way so I'm not showing you the secret code. And I'm just going to quickly copy and paste the secret code here, and then we'll go from there. All right, so the token has been set. Let's just commit this this minor change to include the token. Git add token. Git push. Okay. So now if we check out the Lighthouse Ci project, this test will run for about 3 minutes. So I'll come back to this when the test is completed, but just to stay kind of on time, I will say that thank you for your time. Again, I apologize. This is kind of like more of a coding session, so I hope you guys can see how easy it is to implement. In a minute or two, we'll see the actual results from this. But if you guys have any questions or want to follow up with me in any different way, I'm available pretty much everywhere on the web with my name, Michael Solati. I know we kind of started questions early, but if you guys want to start some questions, additional questions now, we should have time for that. So thank you guys for your patience and following along.
Thank you, Michael. We are waiting for questions. I will have some, but let's wait for our attendees.
Sure. I will say the questions don't even have to be about Lighthouse Ci. It can be about anything. I might not have the correct answer, and I might make up the answer, but you can ask me about anything.
I was going to ask a question about the reports. When they generate the reports, can you change where it's sent to, or does it just automatically go to the bucket for Google?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So the configuration that we had that was recommended or provided was sending it to Google because that's like the easiest one-click solution sort of thing. You can build your own bucket and store your results there, and you can do whatever you want with them, obviously, with your own bucket. I think the Lighthouse Ci project, I think actually has information on how to build your own server for that. So I'll just quick to the get started guide. Hope I can find it quickly. And if not, then yikes, hopefully. So modifications for sites with a custom server. That's not it. The answer to your question is yes. You would have to go through the docs, but you can definitely find how to build a bucket or a place that you can store your own images. It's not images, sorry, results.
Great, this is awesome. I'm looking forward to figuring out how to do the GitHub Actions. I think this would be great.
Absolutely. It's not the most difficult thing to implement. I don't think it's something that you can reasonably do within less than 20 minutes. Yeah. And in the case of this project, I'm only testing it against one web page, but you can just pass in a slew of web pages and just have like a nice regression test to see if there's any change in the performance. Because you can write unit tests, like total integration tests, and that's hella helpful to make sure that your code's actually working properly. Mm-hmm. But to know how your site is performing to the end user, not just like if the code you write works, but how it behaves is really important. And it's really hard to go back and fix things that are busted when it's just piled up. Like if you can nip it at the bud, I think that's, again, infinitely better. I will mention real quick, it looks like the tests have run. So I'm back at the back here at my commits. I'm gonna click into my commits, green check mark. And if I click that, all of a sudden here, I have this new thing, this Lighthouse Ci URL. And if I hover over it, I can see the performance is at 70, accessibility is at 0, because I have to fix that at some point. Best practices 100, SEO 100, PWA 93. And I believe if I click details, it'll take me straight here. So now not only is the test running, now my commits are actually annotated with the test that was run for it. So again, less than 20 minutes, I think, to give you like something meaningful that's attached to each commit, so you can see like how each commit is impacting your websites.
Wow, I think I'm gonna try to introduce the CI for my website. Yeah. So this is, it doesn't have to be, as you mentioned, it's agnostic. So you don't have to be PWA, you don't have to be Angular or anything. It does run this for any kind of website.
Yeah, pretty much. Like I said, the only two files of relevance is the Lighthouse RC, which just tells Lighthouse like how to run the tests against your website. And then finally, you don't have to use a GitHub action. Obviously, you can use like Travis or whatever, but it's just the next thing is your CI script, and we provide templates for most CIs, so you can just run the tests. And that's it. That's all you need to do. So I think it's like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't even have to be a JavaScript website. It could be like Python or Ruby on Rails or whatever. It just works to test your website.
I noticed that I'm somewhat, I have a confession in getting a little bit addicted to Lighthouse to try to improve my numbers. That especially in the beginning, when you start with it, you're going to get often very detailed actionable items like, hey, you have a duplicate JavaScript here. Then if you resolve that, obviously you're going to improve its speed. Or you have, let's take accessibility, you have a missing alternate text for this image. And it gives you a very long list sometimes, or detailed action items. Sometimes it's not as actionable, like when you are improving to the point that you marked off any low-hanging fruits, then it might be harder to improve, but it's a tool which I would really advise anybody to look at, and I think it's pretty awesome.
Absolutely. I will add, don't get don't get overly concerned with Lighthouse. Like, obviously, I would say it's a great tool and it's providing meaningful things to impact to change your website. But it is really, really difficult to get 100 across the board, and some things are outside of your control. Like, one of the things that impacts this website I created was it knocks me for the images I'm serving, and I'm using the images through a third-party API. I have no control over that. So that's not the sort of thing I'm going to stress. But the things that you can change. The things that you know you can't, or don't stress it too much.
Speaking of images, and the Chrome Dev Summit, I've seen that there's a new version of Squoosh, which is a CLI tool to web optimize your set of images. So if you're not taking them from some third-party place and you have influence on them, Squoosh is one of the way you can compress them. So that's an area you might be able to improve significantly if you haven't web optimized your images yet. I've seen before many megabytes, giant digital images just straight put into web applications, and that's, if you web optimize that, you will get a lot of gain. And
as annoying as it might be at this point, you can install Squish to your device, like as a global install, and use it as a CLI tool. So you don't just have to use it from the website. All right, I am going to mute myself and turn off my camera. And Java, I leave it to you to guide us through this.
Yes, so thank you, Michael, again for your presentation. And I will try to paste some links to the chat for you about, like, I see already we have links there. And about Lighthouse. And I'm gonna stop the recording, I think, right now.